Dahlia, Mike, and Harper didn't have much luck in finding Harper's dad, which is not to say that they didn't find him. The rain pattered against the neon lights, refracting it through each and every street and alley. Each footfall echoed. Almost everyone they passed wanted something from them, whether it was to take a photograph with them using strange futuristic hand mirrors, or for them to buy stuff, or to pose for photographs of them buying stuff to put in a newspaper or something. Harper tried to explain that the pictures were from this binary tree computer nonsense, but neither Mike nor Dahlia knew what he was on about, and they just agreed that it was for a newspaper ad. Some of the sea folk had information about where the prisoners from the neighboring kingdoms were kept, but it was usually vague information about where in town they may be and who might know more than them. Eventually, they started getting somewhere. They got into the lobby of the Congressional Building, and the secretary at the elaborate desk said that she might be able to help for the right price. As Mike began negotiations, Dahlia noticed the tip of Alani's ponytail vanishing into a doorframe. When Dahlia tried to follow after her, the door was locked. The secretary was easily entranced by Mike's hypnotic baseball bat and gave them a list of where all the Swamp People prisoners had been set into indentured servitude throughout the city. Mike yelling at the woman after learning of this development brought Dahlia back to the desk, and she did her best to de-escalate the situation. The secretary got the last of their salted bacon out of the deal. She tried to make Mike feel better by explaining that prisoners could take time off of their prison sentence by working hard, and that their system usually provided criminals with a method of finding a stable paying job after release, but Mike still growled something unintelligible about human rights and left in a huff regardless. They went through the list as it grew darker and darker with clouds, even though the rain grew thinner. Each was marked down as a number in the secretary's flowing handwriting, which Mike translated with his piece of saffron's crystal. None of the prisoners were Harper's dad. Most of them seemed happy since they lived a relative life of luxury from the mud-thatched houses and limited technology of their villages. With each report, Harper's tail dragged more and more heavy against the pavement, and later the docks. Dahlia squeezed his shoulder. Finally, they reached the location of the last number. In hindsight, since he was the most recent arrest, he would be either at the top or the bottom of the list, Dahlia noted. Mike closed his eyes to stop them from rolling out of habit. You've been spending too much time around Ari. Is he here? Harper asked, squaring his shoulders. There were a few sea dragons milling around, but there wasn't any sign of a swamp man crest among the unadorned heads. Mostly unadorned, anyway. There was one dragon who rushed into a building with a cloak and mask. They had seen multiple people like that through the city. There was no use to anyone talking to them. Mike fiddled with the watch he had just bought in the floating platform, which the aliens here used as umbrellas, readjusted slightly. I don't see him anywhere. Sorry. Dahlia bit her lip. All of the false confidence Harper had mustered within himself visibly deflated. Okay, I'm gonna go practice my harp. His tail slashed through a puddle and he almost tripped a passing sailor. The sailor opened his mouth in an angry snarl, but noticed Harper had his eyes perpetually closed in civil protest, and swallowed whatever he was about to say and moved on to one of the surrounding shops. Dahlia tried to share a sad look with Mike, but he just stiffly set his mouth in a straight line and signaled that she should follow after their swamp friend while he went off ahead. She knit her brow together as she tried to understand his nonverbal communication. She shook off her confusion and followed Harper to shelter. In the meantime, her teammate had seen a shock of orange sticking up from the side of one of the flying boats and went forward quietly to investigate. He walked toe to heel for silence. The boat he was approaching was elevated off the ground by a pulley far above Mike's head, and the workmen's tools were laying out in the open. Mike grabbed Saffron's crystal to be on standby and knocked on the side of the hole. Inside, someone gasped. No one here, the someone said in English. Mr. Harper's dad? Is that you, sir? Out of the trunk of the boat, a shiny olive-green snout poked into the sporadically dampened air, which was followed by a set of wide blue eyes and an orangey gold crest. What does he want, human? Well, I'd like to know why you're hiding. No, I know that. What does Harper, as you call him, want? Why is he here? The swamp man's claws scraped into the side of the ship. His hands clutched the side as if the only thing keeping him sane, and then readjusted his grip continually as if they were in boiling water. He wants to see you. These sea beasties are monsters for separating a boy from his father like that. It hurt him. The doctor said that he's going to walk with a limp for the rest of his life. It was an accident. Your people just rushed you through to get a guilty verdict to appease the sea folk, and the sea folk just want free labor. This isn't atonement. He hasn't opened his eyes in protest since you left. He came all the way here to see you again. Your son loves you and forgives you, so it's the least you can do to meet up with him again. Mike began to reach for his bat, but the dragon sank back down into the trunk. I don't think that I can do that yet. Harper's right here. What other time are you going to get to see him? There was a pause. The man lay down on the deck and his belly was soaked through his clothes as the rainwater drained through the open latch. He flipped up the hood of his rain jacket. Please, just leave. Come back tomorrow. I might be ready then. I'm just not ready. Mike growled quietly to himself. Okay, man. You better be up to it tomorrow then. Thank you. Whatever. There was a faint rumble of distant thunder, and the sprinkling rain gained confidence. As Mike turned around, he practically ran into a seaman with a freakishly large smile on his face. Those sea folk did tend to smile a lot as a culture. Mike had completely miscalculated when he thought that the people around here would find showing teeth as a sign of aggression. The man put his clawed hand firmly yet gently down on Mike's shoulder. His blackened eyes were squinted into a frantic half-scowl as he widened his grin. Hey, friend, I could not help but overhear. You should not say such things in public. Mike forced his own grin and slowly reached his hand up to the man's to try to gently pry it off himself. I'm sorry, sir. Where I'm from, I can say anything I want. The sea beast's arm alone was heavier than Mike's whole body, and so he had no hope of actually getting it to budge. The sailor ran his wide tongue over his teeth, coating them in slime. That sounds nice, human. You are wrong, though. Worker prisoners are, what's the word? Rich? Limerick? The worker prisoners are lucky. The outlaws who cause real harm, they are those worth talking about. They are worthy of la resistance. I haven't heard anything about what happens to real criminals, but everyone deserves respect. I would like to hear more, though. The man blinked, his smile grew slightly more real, and he relaxed some pressure from Mike's shoulder. There's a meeting tonight at the tip of the statue's tail. I can take you there. Seems great. Can I get my friends first? Elsewhere and earlier in the city, Ari had managed to bargain for a high-tuck umbrella from one of the vendors and generously held it over Saffron. Raffi and Tayo flew on ahead. As they scattered the rain with their wings, passers-by shook their fists at the forest dragons for drenching them. If they could, the two soldiers would have flown higher in order to avoid this, but any pedestrian traffic above the first floor of the buildings was prohibited to avoid collision with the flying boats. Raffi had learned that when he went to the Capitol building at the beginning of the tour to confirm that the king really did authorize it. There weren't a lot of boats out today. The umbrella vendor explained to Ari that it was because it was the weekend and you needed a permit to drive on the weekends, which a lot of people couldn't afford. Saffron grabbed her friend's jacket and pulled him away toward the library. It was for the vendor's own good, since he would lose business if he attempted to answer all of Ari's questions. The human man also always steered the conversation back to biology, and Saffron knew from experience as a fantastical creature how uncomfortable some of his questions could get. When they were near to the library and Ari was starting to nerd out about what the botany section was going to be like, Saffron darted out from under the floating platform and grabbed a sealed bucket of paint from an alleyway before rushing back to Ari's side. Tayo splashed into a puddle as she landed and then tried to shake herself dry. The rain began to slowly seep back into her uniform and fur, but didn't leak through to her skin. "What was that about, Mr. Slabnik?" she asked Ari. He concernedly watched Saffron lightly caressing the water droplets on her glassy surface with the fingertips of her free hand. They clung on her like iridescent leeches sparkling in the white electric light. As she touched them, they burst into a collection of wormy rivulets, snaking down her neck and shoulders to consume the very sand of her being.
The glassman shuddered so violently that she almost dropped the bucket she had practically risked her life for. Saffron? Ari asked. It's a surprise, Saffron signed back. She lightly gripped his wrist with the umbrella watch and led him into the library through the electric automatic doors. His jaw instantly dropped. Saffron carefully closed the umbrella before he instantly walked in a daze to the nearest dusty bookshelf. He ran his finger down the spine of one of the very normal-looking books, and Saffron cringed as his hand was instantly coated in grime. Well, he didn't seem to notice at all. One librarian took Raffi and Tayo to a study room to dry off. She gave Ari's mildly damp hair a concerned look, but decided that he wasn't going to shake himself dry like the forest people certainly would, and continued on. Ari glanced through the books on the shelf, but slumped slightly when he realized that they were all indecipherable to him. He couldn't even tell if the books were all in one language or several. He turned to Saffron. Hey, where are the books about the king or whatever is going on here? Or the ones on botany? I know that you don't like to use your powers to answer mysteries like this, but is there any particular reason this time that you're not saying anything? She didn't answer and instead held out her hand and examined the floating pieces. Anywhere a joint would be on a normal hand was only empty space. With her other hand, she reached out and plucked her palm out of the air. The glass shards of her fingers shuddered slightly at the sudden loss of gravitational stability, but managed to stay airborne. She handed him the palm. Across her surface, she wrote, If I just told all of you what was going to go on, then you wouldn't be as invested in achieving the best possible outcome. Also, I'm protecting the privacy of a friend. Also, not that I don't trust you, but I'm going to need that hand back. She left purposefully. Ari looked at the titles through the glass of the palm, and they almost instantly were translated into Polish. The alphabetical system that the sea folk used didn't translate well, but Ari copied down the letters from a template Saffron provided into his notebook, and slowly found his way to the books that he needed, and a few that he simply wanted to treat himself to between the chapters. He was steeling himself to study for hours. Raffi and Tayo came to find him just as he was getting settled with a stack in a window nook. They found some translated comics imported from the ocean dragons on the other side of the planet, and fell asleep after getting through 3 issues. This took a while, since they stopped every panel to gush to each other about how good the writing and the art were, and to express how surprised they were that they both liked this particular series. Ari would read about the last 20 years' political climate for about 20 minutes, and then take a 5-minute break to look at plant pictures for 5 minutes, and then repeat the cycle. After a few hours of studying, Saffron made an appearance again. I have to talk to you about something, she signed. Ari put a bookmark in the book he was reading and followed her out into the hallway. They came to the entrance of one of the study rooms. Saffron gestured for Ari to go through first. He did, and was instantly soaked in green paint. As he sputtered and tried to gather himself enough to confront Saffron about what had happened, she vanished off into the stacks without a word. Ari tried to carefully wipe the paint out from around his eyes, and then clutched at the glassman's woman's palm to yell at it, but only succeeded in covering the projection of the celebrity's eye and closing off any chance of gauging her reaction. He stumbled in the middle of the aisles to try to find a bathroom to hose off in. He found himself in the entryway, and just as he was about to go up to the librarian at the desk, a furious yet familiar bogwoman charged in out of the mist. She stomped forward and nearly knocked Ari over on her single-minded determination to yell at the librarian. Hello, have you seen any humans or humanoid creatures recently? She snapped as she wobbled back onto her back legs to put her claws up on the ginormous desk. The librarian blinked and looked down at her. Isn't that one of them over there? The librarian pointed at Ari, who looked behind himself theatrically for an imaginary person he hoped they were talking about. He wished he could have had the chance to learn the language before he came on this mission. Zell rolled her eyes. Humans are red, not green. I've seen all their little party, and none of them are that color. I think he's covered in paint, ma'am? His friend must have pranked him. I am a bog woman by birth and a swamp woman by immigration, and that is not paint. Well, if you get into semantics, then it's really more of a dye. We were having the mural repainted, so I know where they got it from. Ari saw some movement out of the corner of his eye and turned to see Saffron waving him over. He glanced back at the aliens, deep in conversation, and he snuck over to her and ducked behind the wall. He unceremoniously shoved the green-dyed glass of her palm back to her. She cringed in horror but accepted it back. The glassman led him aside into a bathroom with large stalls with a full shower system in each. Despite his curiosity, Ari decided not to question why they needed this precaution and just accepted it. Saffron broke into the janitorial supply closet for the glass cleaner. Ari had just decided that he was going to be green forever and opened the door when Saffron rushed past him and locked the door behind herself. Zell mumbled angrily to herself as she charged in from the lobby. Ari grabbed Saffron's shoulder. He expected her to knock on every stall until she found them, but she just marched into the stall next to them, slamming the door with a resounding thwack. After that, it was fairly easy to sneak out, wake up Raffi and Tayo, retrieve their stuff, and meet up with the rest of the group in the alleyway with the mural. Uri and Dahlia met by hugging and then kissed, just long enough for it to be uncomfortable. Mike was the only one who was actually paying attention. Saffron was looking at her still green hand. Raffi was looking behind them for Zell, and Tayo was trying to gather her courage to put her wing around her friend's shoulders. Mike shifted his weight. He flicked his gaze to their new furry friends. Dahlia noticed and sighed quietly to herself. Ari, we got invited to a secret meeting with the resistance against the king. How are we going to ditch our escort? She nodded to the forest dragons without looking at them. Tayo frowned because she had just spoken Polish. Tayo didn't know Polish. Mike rolled his eyes. Hey, Tayo, we're gonna try to find a hotel or somewhere to sleep for the night. Could you and Raffi try to find wherever Alani went off to? Raffi nudged Tayo in the elbow with his bat wing into her side, and she tentatively translated for him. Before she even finished speaking, he grabbed her arm and dragged her off into the city, far, far away from the crazy bog woman. After they were gone, Ori explained to the group that he wanted to hear what the revolutionaries had to say before he presented his findings to the group. They all knew better than to protest and continue onward to the meeting. On a clear day, it would have been just after twilight. The rain started up again as the team meandered through the almost abandoned streets, and the wind picked up to toss raindrops under the umbrella. Saffron tried to grab onto Ari and then Dahlia out of fear, but they would rather cuddle with each other, so she clung to Mike as if that would somehow protect her from the elements. He wasn't entirely comfortable comforting his ex, but he didn't complain about it because she needed it. Harper mumbled potential sad song lyrics to himself. When they finally reached the base of the statue, it looked like there was no one there. Just as they all, except Saffron, began to discuss what to do next, the sailor from earlier came up. He showed them that the door to a supply closet/basement had been plastered over to make it nearly impossible from the nearby street. He knocked on the door. A sliding keyhole opened, almost instantly closed, and then the door was opened. The room was large enough that 30 adult sea folk could fill the space, which was small for them but large for the earthlings. The concrete walls were decorated with tapestries with images of people winning wars, sitting in a room voting on things, and each one with a tag demanding people shop at koozies. There were 5 dragons dressed in black coats and distorted blue masks. One of them was between the size of a sea dragon and a forest dragon, with the tips of red tail feathers occasionally protruding into the open air. The sailor was the only person openly himself. They all silently stared at the earthlings and Harper for a moment before one of the sea folk-sized members exited out the door, while everyone just let him go without so much as saying goodbye. One of the others cleared his throat, and a disguised voice echoed across the smooth concrete walls. Antoine, why have you brought these outsiders? 'Cause we're 7 people and a parrot, Francis. That's still not my name. Whatever. Anton clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. It's time for opening ceremonies, he announced. He randomly pointed at the individual resistance members who would say a stanza of a poem that they'd memorized to verify their identities. One girl kept glancing at the newcomers during her part and stammered and made a lot of mistakes. Antoine made her say the part of one of the missing people to prove that she was actually who she said she was. She squared her shoulders and recited the stanza much more confidently, and so they let her stay. Dahlia, Ari, Mike, Saffron, and Harper all waded through all of this, through the singing of the national anthem, and through everyone expressing what they had done during the week for the cause. Most of them said that they had shopped at Koozies. The humans were asleep by the time the actual meeting started, and they had to be woken up. A tall female sea dragon with a quiet voice began telling a story. She used her own voice. Outside, the rain began to crash to earth with a fury. For the purpose of clarity, I will refer to the people of my planet and resembling such as dragons. Every dragon in the kingdoms who live on our planet is unique, from the reptiles of the swamp to the birds of the mountains to the marine mammals of the sea. Our teeth and claws were forged in the fires of competition and war and hate with each other. It took many years and centuries for our collective kind to find solid ground under our talons, which was, of course, by looking to the stars. Throughout the unending aether of space is not death on our plane of existence, but life. Some might even say unnatural life, fantastical life. It is a place where the people have the metaphorical being of life between their teeth in a grip which will never waver. Even there, as everywhere, there are dragons, and they descended to earth to minister peace in our time of need. All was good for many years. Now unknown to many people on world, Space Dragon Society was one of two overlapping courts in the kingdom of Estelle. The other half of the kingdom was comprised of humanoids with black or white hair and skin like the stars themselves had molded into flesh. The emperor at the time was a dragon, and while the Starman court was thriving and was politically important as their counterparts, they still wanted more. That is where our story starts. Kepler didn't start out as an overly ambitious man. However, he was more skilled and talented in aether manipulation than any sapient in a millennium, which set him on a path of greatness. He had a full-ride scholarship to the Royal College, where he met his best friend Thoth. Thoth was a clever and practical man who was not the most intelligent or the most skilled, but someone who would go weeks without sleep to make up for these deficiencies. After graduation, the two raised through the ranks of the court until they were the most powerful starmen in the realm. Thoth began writing the first preliminary plans to physically split the court into two kingdoms. He and the highest-ranked dragon in that half of the court mandated school curriculums which championed Aetherian excellence to distract from this. In the meantime, Kepler rekindled his childhood relationship with a half-human woman. She had been forced to live on Earth with her human father since the Starman nationalism had grown to a point where all mixed individuals were unofficially banned from the kingdom. Kepler began trying to change some of the dogma against people from other places, and that alerted Thoth to there being something up. Thoth found out about his friend's girlfriend and confronted him about it. Ultimately, Thoth decided to keep the affair secret, but warned Kepler that the relationship couldn't last forever. He thought that this was just a rebellious phase, which would pass after the courts had been officially separated. Thoth was wrong. Kepler began actually caring about his job for the first time since getting his position. He would be leading meetings instead of sleeping through them, and convincing people on the court to vote for things which would bring the whole kingdom back to an archaic past. Any chance that Thoth had for the Starmen to gain independence wilted before Kepler's onslaught of policies and impassioned speeches about togetherness. It was the girlfriend, it had to be. Thoth was waiting for an opportunity to talk to his friend about maybe find some sort of compromise, or to force the arrogant jerk to see reason, when Kepler announced that he was engaged to be married. No one in the kingdom knew who the lucky lady could possibly be, since they were a small gossipy people who would not be able to keep something like dating a high court member a secret. Thoth knew. He knew and wouldn't let his friend continue down this unproductive path any longer. There is boundless speculation about how this happened, and how Kepler found out, but we do know that Thoth killed the fiancée, and Kepler severely injured Thoth in retaliation. Kepler evaded his trial for several months, and when authorities found him again, he was in an apartment on another continent from us on the Dragon planet. There was no furniture. He had written equations and diagrams and fragmented sentences on the walls, and every size of paper. As a master of aether manipulation, the various arresting officers had prepared for property damage and potential casualties. But Kepler complied with their request almost immediately. He was brought before the court. While they were all sympathetic of Kepler's situation, they still felt the need to punish him for assaulting a high court member and evading arrest. They scheduled him to be distanced from his connection to the aether and impeached from his position in government for the rest of his life. He oddly accepted this, but said that he thought he'd found a way to bring his beloved back from the grave. All it would take was sucking the essence from a multitude of people. It wouldn't hurt them in any way, he was adamant to point out. They would just live a life devoid of emotion and ambition. Some might even say that it would be an improvement. In hindsight, the Dragon Court could have been kinder in shutting his idea down, but as it was, their uproarious laughter sealed their fates. Kepler had a button hidden in his drink thermos, and when he pressed it, he released an aether weapon that displaced every star dragon in the kingdom a second after everyone else. They could be seen, but couldn't see or interact with anyone else ever again. After that, he didn't have much trouble getting volunteers to provide him with essence to successfully resurrect his deceased love, as if harm had never befallen her. The librarian looked up from the journal and stared blankly at the shifting shadows on the wall as her mind turned over what she had just read. She knew this story already, but something about the resurrection tickled her instincts. Two glowing almond shapes on the wall darkened slowly, and the cat's growling stopped. She squinted and looked at the surrounding shadows harder. If she didn't know better, she would say that they looked like a... She stormed out of the library, stamped down the hall, and pounded on Mr. Halibut's door. She heard him roll out of bed and crash to the floor in a panic. He stumbled to his feet and creaked the door open a crack. "Why didn't you say that the cat was a silhouetted temporal distortion?" "Why didn't I say it was a what?" "I think I know what's going on with Mr. Catton, and I might be able to fix it."